it was a signal that one foreign leader, and I think there will be more, is saying, no, I've looked at this, it's ridiculous, and we're not playing by that type of nonsense. Israel's got the right to defend itself, and we support Israel's defense of itself. And, you know, all countries have difficulties and make mistakes during wartime, but this is not genocide. So I really appreciate President Orban. He's a controversial figure, considered a right-wing figure in Hungary and in Europe, but he's very, very pro-Israel, and it's important. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu goes to Washington to meet again for the second time already in this administration with American President Donald Trump. What happened? Was the trip successful? Actually, it does not appear to have been successful. We'll explain why in just a moment. Welcome to Inside the Epicenter. Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg, co-founder with my wife Lynn of the Joshua Fund, a ministry to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus, according to the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And the Joshua Fund, part of our mission is to educate the church in North America and around the world, certainly here in Israel and the epicenter, about what's happening here in Israel and the Arab Muslim world, and try to make sense of it from a biblical perspective, and to encourage and mobilize Christians to learn and to pray and to give and to go to the work of the Lord here in the Middle East. Happy to be with my co-founder and my dear wife, Lynn. Lenny, hi. It's great to be with you on this edition of Inside the Epicenter.
Yes, it's really good to be here. It's April 9th here in Israel as we're recording this episode, and we've just come through the Muslim holiday month of Ramadan, and we're on the cusp of Passover, just starting tomorrow night here in Israel. Or Saturday night. So we'll be. It's a time of holidays, and but still a time of a lot of questions, a lot of unknown.
Exactly. And a lot of things are happening. We have just finished a wonderful trip with pastors and ministry leaders and their spouses from the United States, the Joshua Fund hosting this with an organization, a wonderful nonprofit, nonpartisan organization in the United States called Faith Wins. We'll share a little bit of that in the second half of this podcast, and we'll do a whole podcast on it next, hopefully for the next episode. Lots to share with you. And actually, that's going to be a topic of what we saw, what we heard, that we're going to cover on several upcoming podcasts. We had an amazing time with those pastors and their wives at the Joshua Fund, welcoming and hosting pastors and other evangelical leaders, and not only taking them around the country to obviously walk where Jesus and the apostles and the prophets walked, and to pray and to study the scriptures and to worship, but to meet Israeli pastors and ministry leaders, to meet Israeli leaders, and now since October 7th, this is only the second delegation or group that we've been able to welcome because of the intensity of the war. The first one, of course, with Governor Mike Huckabee, who's now as we record this, he's being voted on by the United States Senate right now, and so we expect him to be the next U.S. ambassador to Israel. And so we'll say a big, hearty congratulations to him right now in faith that by the time you hear this, that will be a done deal. We'll talk to him in the upcoming days as well. But we've only been able to do two of these delegations, one in December 23 with Governor Huckabee and some very, very prominent evangelical leaders. And this is the second. But this is more of the kind of the grassroots pastors of key influential churches in I think a dozen different states around the United States. Wonderful, wonderful time. And we want to share a little bit more about that, give you a taste of it in the second half of the podcast, including a little of the taste of our meeting with President Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel. That was a very, very special and rare opportunity for evangelical leaders to come and to sit with the president at the president's residence. So anything else you want to tease about that trip, Lynn? We just are literally coming off of it. They all flew out this morning, and we've caught our breath for a few hours. You've already met with some Palestinian Christian leaders, and now we're doing some podcasting.
Yes, it's been a busy period for sure, but it was wonderful to spend time with all those Americans. It's always such an encouraging and refreshing time when people come from abroad. You know, there's the wonderful proverb that says, "Good news from a distant land is like cold water," and they really did bring us some good, refreshing cold water with their visit. It just refreshed our spirits for sure. So that was a great blessing, and of course, I mentioned Ramadan and Passover, but of course.
Yeah.
Easter weekend
Right.
also coming up. And so to have all these pastors heading back home, preparing for Holy Week, in their churches, and to have Israel and fresh in their minds is such a blessing, that a real gift from the Lord, I think, to them and to their congregation. So we're excited about that.
Amen. And another topic we want to at least touch on in this episode, we won't be able to drill in on it so much in this one, but I want to at least mention, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes, is an uprising that's going on in Gaza of a growing number. First, it was a few dozen, then it was a few hundred. Now it seems to be a few thousand Palestinian, mostly Muslims, in Gaza protesting openly against Hamas and saying, basically Hamas is horrible and evil and they need to get out, they need to give up, and they need to let us have our lives back. Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting development and something we want to at least touch on now so that you're aware of it in case you aren't already. And then we will, we're hoping to do, we've actually reached out to somebody a Palestinian who's very closely connected. He's from Gaza, and we're hoping that he can come on the podcast soon and talk about what's going on there, and with a little bit more direct connection to those on the ground. So, well, let's start, Lynn. I mean, I know you were going to sort of interview me on this one because this is sort of a geopolitical one. Where would you like to start? There's a lot cooking.
Well, like you mentioned, this wonderful delegation we had got the great honor to meet with a really wonderful leader here in Israel, which is President Herzog. And that was such an honor and such a delight. He's such a warm and welcoming person, really wants to have a conversation and not just sort of come and lecture you. He really wants to have interaction. That was a blessing. So we were hoping to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu, but he chose Trump over our group. So, but it's understandable. But why? Why now? Why did the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, at this moment need to get to Washington? What was he hoping to meet about? What was he hoping to get out of it? And so let's start there. Why? Why now? Why did he go now?
Sure. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had actually been in Hungary last week, meeting with the president of Hungary, who's a very, very strong supporter of Israel. And in fact, because Netanyahu is under indictment by the International Criminal Court for totally crazy reasons that he's being accused of waging a genocide against Palestinians. Look, there's a lot of problems in Gaza, but Israel isn't committing genocide. But the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has a warrant out for his arrest. So Hungary, the president of Hungary, decided to withdraw Hungary from their relationship, their agreement with the ICC, because they don't want to be part of that type of nonsense. And that cleared the way for Netanyahu's first trip abroad since that indictment was released. So that was a good trip. We don't need to get into it, I don't think, in that much detail, but it was a signal that one foreign leader, and I think there will be more, is saying, no, I've looked at this, it's ridiculous, and we're not playing by that type of nonsense. Israel's got the right to defend itself, and we support Israel's defense of itself. And, all countries have difficulties and make mistakes during wartime, but this is not genocide. So I really appreciate President Orban. He's a controversial figure, considered a right-wing figure in Hungary and in Europe, but he's very, very pro-Israel, and it's important. That was an important trip. So Netanyahu was supposed to come back here to Israel, and a key friend and ally of Netanyahu had said that he would work on getting a meeting between our group and Netanyahu. And then, of course, Netanyahu suddenly went to Washington. So here's the answer to your question. There was the surface reason. The surface reason is that President Trump recently announced that he was not going to allow other countries to have such high tariffs on American products and goods and services and things when it was so out of balance with America's approach towards tariffs. So he increased tariffs, slapped higher tariffs on many, many countries, including Israel. It turns out, and I actually didn't know this, so just being honest with everyone, I didn't know that Israel had a 17% tariff on American goods and services coming into the state of Israel. And so Trump put on a 17% tariff on Israel. And but as he did that, Netanyahu realized, that's not a healthy relationship between two great allies. And so Netanyahu announced immediately last week that Israel was canceling all Israeli tariffs on American goods and going to zero. So that was a very good move, I think, by Netanyahu. Should have been done sooner, right? But okay, that's what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to get every country to rethink its tariff policy towards the United States. And of course, between the U.S. and China, this is becoming a trade war, a tariff war. We're not going to get into that right now. But so Netanyahu went to zero. Trump did not immediately go to zero. So Netanyahu said, can I come meet with you and kind of work that out? So that was the reason that was sort of initially announced why Netanyahu was not going to come right back to Israel right before Passover, but go to the United States on this quick trip. But there were several other things going on. First is there's discussion about whether the Trump team is able or was about to announce some sort of new hostage deal to get all or many or at least some of the hostages out before Passover. That was very important. And the biggest issue, although there are several others, but the biggest issue is the United States getting ready to go to war to bomb Iran's nuclear sites, or was Trump's threat or let's say warning to the Iranian leadership to if you want to come to the table and negotiate, you got 2 months, and the month of that is already expired. So we're in the final month of a 2-month sort of warning and window and ultimatum, really. Come and talk, or all bets are off. And so those were the reasons Bibi was heading to Washington.
Okay, so let's go through those 3 reasons and see what kind of results Bibi got. So starting with the tariffs, it's kind of funny that we're called the Joshua Fund, but Joel and I both are not numbers people or finance people, but I get confused, a tariff, a tax, but that's certainly been a big topic in the last few months with President Trump and Canada. I feel like it started with Canada, but now it's just country by country. Yeah, and Mexico, but country by country, he's saying, if you're going to tax imported American goods, then we're going to tax your imported goods. That's the bottom line of how this system is working. I mean, what the situation is right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I'm not some international high finance guy, but tariffs is something I do get. My work for Steve Forbes as his deputy campaign manager and policy director. Steve Forbes was very much a free market guy, and tariff is basically a tax on international goods and services moving back and forth, and it can be and tariffs can be used to advance foreign policy issues. For example, President Trump is putting very high tariffs on China, not so much to tell China not to invade Taiwan. That's sort of a separate track. But to say, Communist China, you're not opening your markets to U.S. goods. You highly restrict your markets, but you expect us to have totally open markets to you. No, we're not doing that. So he's imposed high tariffs suddenly, and now China has come back with higher tariffs on us, and it's escalating. Trump put on more, and now just moments ago, China put on another 50% increase in tariffs. That's to advance foreign policy objectives. But then there are the economic objectives, just of raising money or regulating the flow of goods and services. So all that to say,
when it comes to Israel, that's more of what's going on. I'm assuming it's more of an economic calculation.
Yeah, right. Basically, a tariff is a way of taxing incoming goods so that the local government makes money off of imports. And hopefully that will it's got 2 reasons. One is to make money for the local government, in this case, the Israeli government. The second reason is to hopefully slow down some of the import of American goods or other goods from other countries so that Israeli companies can have a little bit more, selling more to their own people rather than just imports. So it can be a protective measure to protect local companies. And but in this,
So with Netanyahu, you're saying the Americans put this tariff of 17% because that's what Israel was doing to American goods, and he anticipated that. Wow, now I'm doing what you hoped to accomplish with this. So now back off and take the tariff away. But this is not exactly what happened.
Right. So Netanyahu was jumping on a plane to signal this is an oversight. We should have corrected this a long time ago. We don't really need a 17% tariff on American goods. For crying out loud, you're our number one ally. We made a mistake. We'll immediately correct that. So that was a good move on Netanyahu. He's the first leader, but there are other leaders that want to negotiate those tariffs down, and that's what Trump wants. So there was an assumption on the Netanyahu team, and certainly every Israeli watching this, that the meeting would result in an announcement that the United States was either going to completely remove the new tariff on Israel or step it down over the coming weeks and months, whatever. None of those things happened. There was not a deal. And that has really sort of surprised everybody, because that's ostensibly the main reason that he went, or at least the public reason.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing. And I will tell you that Netanyahu is now the only world leader to have had two meetings in the White House, in the Oval Office. The first one could not have gone better. This one did not go so well. I don't mean that the relationship is derailed, but there was such an expectation. These are two countries that are friends, and these two leaders work well together, so shouldn't be a problem. Get that cleaned right up. And Netanyahu wasn't even asking for a negotiation. He immediately got rid of Israeli tariffs on American goods. So that was disappointing. And in that sense, the column I wrote for All Israel News is, basically Netanyahu came home empty-handed.
Well, we can hope and pray that those things get sorted out. I mean, has Trump commented, or the team there commented on, do they want something more from Israel, or why are they not?
It's not clear yet. As you and I record this, it's only been maybe 36 hours since the meeting, and I haven't seen anything yet that convinces me, okay, that's the reason. I was like, there's no official reason yet. I don't know, because I would have also thought, I think it's a reasonable thought to think that if Israel goes to zero, which they just did, and Trump sort of rewards that would be a signal then to many other countries that if you go to zero on your tariffs, then the U.S. will go to zero on tariffs. And that's exactly what Trump wants, isn't it? So maybe there are some technical issues that have to get resolved. Maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. So that's why we thought, well, we better, given that it was such a surprise that Netanyahu suddenly went to Washington, let's do a podcast. Let's walk people through what's going on. But part of it is we don't know what's going on. And even if all the details had to still be worked out, Trump is the type of leader who just announces, okay, we have a deal, even if all the I's still have to be dotted and the T's crossed. Okay, he doesn't mind announcing a deal. Didn't do it.
Interesting. So topic number one, the tariff situation, ? Unresolved. So the second reason that you mentioned that he was over there was the potential of a new deal that might get our hostages out. It's a little bit confusing, I think, to some people about, we hear about all these different kinds of negotiations. So are the Israelis actually negotiating directly with Hamas? No, there's always some kind of third party. If sometimes it seems to be the Qataris, the Americans have gotten involved, the Egyptians have been involved, right? So,
yes.
So what was the hope? What do we think has been going on most recently with who and what were we hoping for?
Right. Mostly it's the Egyptians at the moment that are taking the lead, though you're right. The two countries that are working sort of in tandem is Qatar, a putative American ally in the Gulf, but that plays both sides, hosts top Hamas leaders on its soil, has the most anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic television network in the world on its own soil, Al Jazeera. And Qatar also has very close ties with the Iranian regime. So it's not clear to me why the United States government sees Qatar as an ally, but they do. And we have, and the CENTCOM base, the main sort of headquarters in the Middle East for the U.S. Central Command, meaning the military team that's overseeing all of our military operations in the Middle East, is based just outside of Doha, which is the capital of Qatar. Our naval base for the Fifth Fleet is actually in Bahrain, which is also a Gulf state. It has a treaty with Israel, right? The normalization treaty of the Abraham Accords, and is a very good and faithful and consistent ally of the United States. Qatar is playing both sides. Yeah. And, but anyway, Qatar, because of its relationship with Hamas's senior leadership and because of its relationship with Iran, does have a relationship with the terrorist leaders on the ground in Gaza. And so, I don't think they should be one of our allies, but they are the people that have some leverage, or at least interaction with and direct channels to. But Egypt, which is a much better ally of the United States historically and has a peace treaty, the first Arab peace treaty with Israel back from 1979, the Camp David Accords. They, Egypt used to occupy Gaza, right? And until 1967, when Israel captured it, Egypt was in charge of Gaza for a long time. And so they have a lot of ties to Gaza. They have a lot of intelligence on Gaza, and they have a border with Gaza. So both Qatar and Egypt are trying to get a deal. Egypt has floated this sort of new deal. I think it's 8 Israeli hostages would come out, live hostages, and then Hamas would get between a 40 and 70-day ceasefire. That's sort of on the table right now. Israel doesn't seem willing to accept that. That seems, and the apparent reason is that's too much time for you to get a ceasefire for only 8. We want all 24 live hostages back, and we want them back immediately. And Hamas keeps saying no. So yes, Netanyahu's second objective, and a very high objective, I don't even want to rank them, but in the order of our conversation, it's probably the second highest. The tariff was probably the lowest issue. The issue of the hostages was a very high objective. And I think Netanyahu went thinking that he would hear that the U.S. had convinced Hamas to let out a bunch of hostages, maybe all of them, in sort of a Ramadan Passover deal that would be wonderful. Every Israeli is hoping for it, praying for it, and it did not happen. So it doesn't mean it won't happen, but there aren't a lot of positive signs as you and I meet or discuss this on this podcast. So it's pretty discouraging in the days before the Passover, because the whole country of Israel was a hostage during the time of Egypt's slavery of and of us. And so as we all prepare to celebrate Passover, it's a tough time to say we've got now hostages that let my people go, but there are still 24 live Israeli hostages in those terror dungeons. I've heard people say, everywhere you go in Israel, it's just unthinkable, and it's just so hard to grasp that we're about to go through a second Passover with these people being enslaved. I mean, being imprisoned as hostages, being treated terribly. They're not in places like an international prisoner of war, according to some sort of world standards that you should treat people with some certain level of dignity and treat them for their medical conditions. I mean, we're hearing out of the people who have returned most recently just the most horrific descriptions of people being held in chains, people being starving, people being tortured. It's difficult to celebrate Passover and think about a freedom when we still have got people that we love and have been praying for. It'll be the second whole Passover that they're still absolutely there. And as you and I record this, we're on day 551. We've just passed the 1.5 year mark. It's been 18 months and 2 days now, and it's mind-boggling. And I want to encourage our listeners to keep praying of course, but I also want to encourage you not to give up in praying. Like, we just don't know. Lynn and I aren't going to, try to snow you and tell you that we understand that in God's sovereignty, when he could force Hamas to let all these hostages out, why he hasn't. But we shouldn't let it shake our faith. Man is planning this for evil. God is intending this somehow for good. I can't explain. And that is a question that we've been processing with the pastors and their wives that we've been traveling around this country, including going to the Gaza border and visiting several communities that were Israeli communities that were invaded and devastated, savaged by Hamas on October 7th, and letting them see it, walk through homes that were burnt and just pockmarked with bullets on every wall and just totally destroyed with missiles. And for them to see it, and you think, wow, we're already 18 months after it, and you can still, smell the stench of war and of, I can't understand it, but I don't want us to lose faith. Let's just put in context about Passover. The Jews were held hostage in Egypt for more than 400 years. I can't understand that one either. We love and celebrate God's supernatural, dramatic liberation of the Jews on Passover during the Exodus, and the dramatic miracles that God did, and the judgment that fell upon Egypt and its leaders, particularly the Pharaoh, after more than 400 years of Jews being in captivity and in slavery. So, but none of us think that this is going to go on for 400 plus years. So it's a tough one, and we've got to keep it in perspective of God knows. Let's keep praying for the Lord's mercy on all of these hostages.
Absolutely. Well, I think we should take a break for a moment. And when we get back, we'll talk about the third reason that Bibi went to Washington, which is really an existential threat that Israel has been living under for quite a while. And that is the threat of the Iranian nuclear program. So when we come back, I will ask you, what kind of hope did President Trump give Bibi about that topic? Today's scripture passage comes from Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, which read, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." We've been asking you to join us in prayer on every podcast for the people of Israel, for the people of the Epicenter, as they are suffering through a terrible period of warfare, on both sides. We've been praying, like we've said, for over a year and a half for the release of all our hostages, for a peace treaty to really be possible, for the war to stop, for soldiers to stop losing their lives, for Palestinians to stop suffering. And sometimes it gets wearying to keep asking the Lord for something when you're just still waiting for his answer. But let's not grow weary. Let's persist in prayer. It also talks about that we should be persistent in prayer. And so let's do that. Let's keep praying. Let's spur one another on to love and good deeds. And let's keep our focus on doing what we can do to keep sharing messages of hope, of the gospel, and of helping people who are in need, that we can give them practical support with, whether it's food and water, whether it's places to live. These are the things that Joshua Fund is focused on doing, giving both words of hope and the helping hand of food and other supplies that people are needing in these difficult times. So we really appreciate your prayers for us, for our team, that we can not grow weary in well-doing, that we can all be persistent in prayer and not give up. We know that God has a harvest coming, whether it's a harvest of people coming to faith, even in the darkest of times, or of his light shining through, his love being very obvious when it gets darker and darker, or those big things we're asking for, which are the things that just are way beyond our ability, which is the end of war, the end of this war. So thank you so much for joining us in these prayers.
Yeah, and I thank you, Linda. I appreciate that passage, and I just want to emphasize that phrase, "for at the proper time." That's God's sovereign decision, right? And we're just going to have to accept that we don't know what God's proper time is. as our pastor in college who invested so much in us, discipled us, we've mentioned him. We should do a show on him, Dr. T.E. Koshy. But he used to say, Joel, Lynn, we serve a prayer, hearing and a prayer, answering God, a wonder-working God. And if you, like us, need a little English to English translation, because that was hard. He was from India and he had a very strong accent, and it took us a while to adjust. But Joel and Lynn, we serve a prayer hearing and a prayer answering God, a wonder working God, a God who does miracles, works wonders. This is our God. And if he doesn't move as fast as we want him to move, that's about our expectations. It's not about him not hearing us and him not being willing to answer. And I believe we need a global movement of prayer to force, that God would force, in fact, he would terrify the terrorists and force them to let all the live hostages go, and of course the dead bodies as well, so they can be buried properly. There could be a end to this trauma, and because the nation of Israel, not to mention the Palestinians, will not be healed until this war is over, until there's finality and closure, and then the long road to healing is going to take place. That's we've talked about that on other shows. We'll talk about it in the future. The amount of biblical counseling that's going to be necessary, and so much more. But we can't let ourselves grow weary. We're weary. Lynn and I are weary at this, and our team is, but not without hope. And we just have to keep fortifying each other. And that trip with all these pastors, basically almost 50 pastors and ministry leaders, that was a B12 shot for us. Just an encouragement, fresh people coming in saying, we're with you. We love you. We're praying for you. We're helping you. And what else can we do? How else can we help? That was really encouraging.
Yeah, I really appreciate one of the pastors in particular. We had the honor of learning a little bit about the Iron Dome. That was an amazing, miraculous system that they had a chance to learn a little bit about how that was developed. And one of the pastors,
from one of the architects, the engineers that invented the whole system.
So one of the pastors said, he just had a vision for a spiritual Iron Dome, an Iron Dome of prayer. And so the more prayer that can come to be united in prayer for this part of the world, the better. It will be an amazing thing that God will honor. So we do pray for more and more prayer partners to be raised up. Amen. But one of the big things we need to pray about and now talk about is this third topic, and why Benjamin Netanyahu hoped to have some good news coming back from Washington. And that is this other threat. I mean, we talk about Hamas and the whole situation with Gaza, which has been so difficult. And yet that's one dark cloud, but there's another even larger cloud, which is this nuclear threat from Iran. Now, we know Iran is connected to Gaza too, by funding, by ideology. So all of these threats around Israel, whether it's Yemen, whether it was Hezbollah up in Lebanon, these are all ways that Iran is attacking Israel, surrounding Israel, working Israel. But in addition to that, they have their own nuclear program that they've been racing towards weaponizing and finalizing. And that's been a big, I would say, a mission of Netanyahu for years now, even appearing before the Congress of the United States and speaking about that. So where are we on that situation? What is the threat worse now? Have things been deterred? And why? What was the conversation most recently in the White House between these two leaders on that topic?
I appreciate you asking, Lynn. And I believe that Iran is the main reason that Netanyahu actually went to Washington on sort of this emergency visit, because about a month ago, President Trump issued this warning, this ultimatum to the Iranian regime. Look, you got 2 months. You want to negotiate a deal with me to end your nuclear weapons threat once and for all, so it's never an issue again. I'm willing to talk. I'm a deal maker, but you got 2 months. And after that, all bets are off. And that was a letter that he sent to the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei. And it was secret for a while. Then it leaked through a news organization called Axios. And then it was confirmed by the White House. And then Secretary of State Marco Rubio went public and said, when the president means, you got 2 months or else, he means we have the right to attack. And
And they even moved quite a few military assets, let's say, of the United States have recently been moving into the area, right? Aircraft carrier, I think, and some different.
Yes. Two aircraft carrier, nuclear aircraft carrier strike groups. All Israel News has been reporting and picking up off of the coverage of others that the Trump administration has moved these two aircraft carrier strike groups into the region. They've moved long-range bombers, B-52 bombers. Those are strategic bombers that carry very heavy, very powerful missiles and bombs that could destroy Iran's nuclear sites. Refueling tankers have been moved to the region. Other fighter crafts and bombers. Air defenses, including what's called the THAAD system, which is a U.S.-designed air defense to shoot down missiles that if the United States and maybe Israel in combination attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran may launch, hundreds, thousands of missiles at Israel and U.S. targets and U.S. allies, including our Sunni Arab allies, Saudi, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, and others in the region, Jordan, Egypt. So we definitely are watching this stream of U.S. building up the military might in the way that the previous administration didn't do, not trying to make a partisan point, just noting that didn't happen in the previous administration. It's happening now, and it comes with a ticking clock. You got 2 months, and now we're 1 month through it. So Netanyahu, I think, was going to hope to sort of finalize, okay, Iran's not serious about negotiations, so we're probably going to war, right? How are we going to do that?
Right, which is something the Israeli people and I don't know about the Israeli people, but the Israeli leadership, let's say, and military leadership have been talking about, almost since the beginning of the Hamas invasion, right after that happened, which is that, we talk often that Israel's facing this 7-front war, and a lot of these fronts are the tentacles or the arms of an octopus, which are all connected to a head, which is in Iran. And so people have said what we need to do is strike the head. If we keep fighting all these arms, they're just going to come back to life again, as long as Iran has the ability to keep funding, keep leading, keep threatening the region. So we have been trying to take some strategic ways to weaken Iran, including taking out their air defense systems, which is a huge win for Israel and kind of paves the way for a potential military invasion, whether it's U.S., Israel combined, something like that, right? So there was sort of this feeling like we're really going to take them on and America is going to be the one to lead the way. But this is not the feeling that Bibi comes home with.
No, it's not. And I'll just add one more thing. You're 100% right in both your facts and your analysis. Again, every Israeli would prefer a true negotiated deal. Don't get me wrong. Lynn would want that. I would want that. Everybody, any sane person, especially an evangelical believer, blessed are the peacemakers. We want peace.
But you need a partner. You need a peace for that, a partner for that. And we don't have a reasonable partner.
Right. And Iran's leadership is not reasonable. However, if the combination of the maximum pressure economic sanctions that have been reimposed on Iran once Trump got in office, just like he did in the previous administration, which had nearly bankrupted the Iranian regime. They were down to $5 billion in foreign currency reserves. And now at the end of the Biden administration, they were already back up to $18 to $20 billion worth of foreign currency reserves because the previous administration wasn't enforcing sanctions. Trump has put those draconian sanctions back on. That plus moving all the military assets up close to the Iranian border and issuing the letter was all designed to sort of force the Iranian regime to say, okay, we give up. Right. It's not worth it. Now we believe you that you will attack us. So Netanyahu certainly wants a negotiated settlement if he can, but he deeply does not believe that the Iranian regime will ever get to this point. And they never have. So he's skeptical. He's actually nervous about the idea of a deal, even though Trump is such a great deal maker. Netanyahu, I think in his heart, doesn't really want a deal at this point. He says they've had all the time in the world. He hasn't said this. I'm saying I think, knowing him, knowing his team, watching this over many decades, I think my personal view is that Netanyahu thinks there are no deals to be had. Let's take out this thing with American help, Israeli help. while we can, before they actually build their first bomb. They've got enough enriched uranium to have built at least 6, and we can't wait any longer. So I think Netanyahu went to Washington with the idea that something else that we've been hearing. We have some sources that indicate that people close to President Trump have been saying, get this thing done. Memorial Day, July 4th, sometime in the next number of months, if there's a moment to take out the Iran nuclear program, we should do it. Let's not wait any longer, because Iran is so close to breaking out and just building the actual bomb, and they'll do it in secret. We won't know, will we?
Yeah.
So that's the fear. But Netanyahu came home empty-handed. And in fact, Trump announced something that Bibi did not see coming by all the reporting that's out there. And I don't have a reason to doubt this, but that Netanyahu learned just a few hours before his meeting with President Trump that President Trump has opened up direct negotiations at the highest levels with the foreign minister of Iran, and that those start this coming weekend. You and I are recording this on Wednesday. The negotiations are supposed to begin in the Gulf country of Oman on Saturday. Direct negotiations between the United States and Israel. And Netanyahu was, by all reports, was blindsided by that, and not that happy about it, and confused, and so therefore came home with empty-handed.
Well, there's one thing I would say we could say about President Trump. He's unpredictable. He definitely surprises people, for sure. What's your take on what the American administration is, what their game plan is? Why this unexpected turn? Is this for optics? Is this some sort of a trick that they want to make the Iranians feel comfortable? But actually, we are. What do you think is going on, or do we know?
I think the genuine answer is that President Trump sees himself as a negotiator, and he doesn't want to have to attack Iran or any country militarily if he doesn't have to. He gave an ultimatum, and ostensibly they've responded. So the question is, and here's the key. Here's the key. If we say, and we really mean it, a negotiated diplomatic settlement is much better than anything else, if it's real, if it's verifiable, then you got then with somebody who is so pro-Israel like President Trump, somebody that you can trust, has been tough on Iran, has not been bamboozled or mesmerized or fooled by the Iranian regime. This is the best case scenario. This President Trump, giving the Iranian regime every opportunity to make a deal and to literally dismantle everything and disclose everything, and then dismantle everything and send in inspectors and make sure. So, that would be a big breakthrough if that really happened. This has happened in the past, and this is what Netanyahu said. He was caught off guard, as best as I can tell, but he did say in the Oval Office, well, look, I certainly want a diplomatic solution if possible. And this has happened when the government of Libya decided that it might be attacked by the United States or NATO, and decided to disclose its nuclear program, its nuclear weapons program, and dismantle it and give it to the United States, and it could all get carted out. That's what happened after the United States attacked the Taliban and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and then invaded Iraq in 2003 to remove Saddam Hussein and capture any chemical weapons that might have existed. Libya thought we could be next, and they opened up. And so that's an example that worked, that truly worked. And thank God, because Libya doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, but it's a mess now, and it's got a rebel terrorist government in charge now. So thank God they're not also a nuclear weapons power. So that's what Netanyahu said, and we should be praying. The key is, just like when your friend takes a move that you didn't expect, and he takes a move that you didn't expect also on, you didn't get what you wanted on tariffs, and you didn't get what you were hoping for on the hostages, it creates anxiety. Jews are anxious because we feel like previous American governments have been, for 50 years, have been bamboozled, mesmerized, and tricked by one Iranian regime after another, and we don't have any margin for error. And that's Netanyahu's fear. Is it a legitimate fear? It is a legitimate fear. Does that mean that Trump is wrong to pursue this? No, not necessarily. But Netanyahu, I think he's thinking, let's just get this thing done. Let's just attack and get it over with.
Right.
And that's where we are right now.
Well, it's a lot to pray about. We need to continue to pray for our leaders in America, our leaders in Israel, and for God to thwart leaders in other places like Iran, where they are designing evil. We've said often to different people when you're speaking about Iran, that the Persians are the ones who invented chess. They have a long game. They're very strategic in their thinking. We know in the past when there have been some of these negotiated peace about the nuclear situation, they've denied, admitting the inspectors. Yeah. Oh, we're not doing anything, but no, you can't come look either. So what kind of agreement is this? They're not a trusted partner. And so there's a lot to be nervous about, but the Lord tells us be anxious for nothing and instead bring our prayers and supplications to the Lord. And that's what we're going to do, not only to pray for our leaders, but to pray for God's intervention. He can do amazing things. And by the way, praying for the Iranian people who want freedom. And we have Iranian friends who say they have been in Iran looking at the skies, asking God, when are the Americans going to come and set us free?
Or the Israelis.
Which is an amazing thing. And right. the Iranian people have suffered. And these, like you mentioned, these draconian measures don't come without a price on the street in Iran and how the people are faring. And so, we need to pray for people in all these places.
Well, and that's one, I appreciate that. And one other fear that Iranians now have, and the Iranians in the diaspora have, and Israelis have, and others, which is if a deal gets made, doesn't that let the Iranian regime off the hook? Let's say they do everything right. Now Trump's going to release all the sanctions, and now the money's going to start flowing into Iran, and that's going to strengthen the regime, which just seems not right. Mm-hmm. When Iran is so poor and is so struggling, and the people want to overthrow this regime, shouldn't we be helping the revolutionary impulses of the Iranian people to overthrow it? You and I have had the very rare opportunity to sit with the man who very likely would be the next leader of Iran if Iran becomes free, independent, and democratic, or maybe not democratic, but at least a moderate, benign monarchy, and that would be Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah of Iran. You and I met with him and interviewed him for the Rosenberg Report and All Israel News when Pahlavi made his first ever historic visit to Israel several years ago. That was just astonishing that you and I had that opportunity to sit with him. And he said, I don't want to join the Abraham Accords. I want to create a new peace and normalization agreement between a new Iran and the state of Israel, the people of Israel. And I want to call it, do you remember what it was going to be called?
The Cyrus Accords.
Cyrus Accords, after King Cyrus, who biblically was the great friendly, monarch of the Persian Empire that set the Jews free to go back to the land of Israel, back to Jerusalem. He even sent them with money and support to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and rebuild the temple of Jerusalem. That all came from an Iranian leader, Cyrus. And so this is the Crown Prince of Iran, part of the royal family, right? Who says, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm the legitimate leader of Iran, and a new Iran under my regime, a free, independent, normal Iran would immediately make a peace treaty, a Cyrus Accords deal with with Israel. Wow, that would be astonishing. And so people like him, I'm sure, are also confused, anxious, and yet Trump has a lot of goodwill, and we shouldn't just, start going, just losing all faith, not because of any partisan view of Trump, but because of his track record on Israel, on Iran, and on our allies, our Arab allies in the region. And I just want to equate, and maybe we pivot here, the Iranian people, there's such an uprising of demanding the overthrow of the Iranian regime. But we're beginning to see some signs actually in Gaza of Palestinians beginning to speak out publicly against the reign of terror of Hamas.
Yeah, that's been an amazing thing to be watching. It's on most of the Israeli news, and certainly on all our front pages of the papers. The sort of an update on what's happening. There were skeptics, wondering, is this real? Is this true? For the most part, it seems like it is an authentic protest, and we've seen actually already some of them paying a price with their lives of the people organizing these.
Yeah, Hamas has brutally tortured and murdered some of the organizers, and yet, over several weeks, the numbers of people openly on social media and out in the streets blasting Hamas as evil and wicked and ruining their lives, and they should be removed, they should leave, they're corrupt and horrible, and they should be overthrown immediately. That went from a few dozen to a few hundred to a few thousand, and Palestinian experts who live in the West, in the United States and elsewhere, and have close ties to Gaza, some of them are from Gaza, are commenting they believe this is real. Now, we're at a moment just in the days that you and I are talking about at the end of Ramadan. It's a time of the end of fasting. So it's called the Feast of Eid al-Fitr. That's sort of the end of this month-long time of fasting and prayer. And so because of that, the protests have sort of subsided for the last several days. We'll see if they emerge again, or if the capture, torture, and murder of some of the organizers will create a chilling effect in which Palestinians refuse to speak out against Hamas again. But that's something I want us to watch, and we should do at least one or several podcasts about it, because that's something we have not seen in 18 months, some sort of effort, because we keep asking ourselves, where are the Palestinians who think this is wrong? Admittedly, though, if you're unarmed and you're being bombed by Israel because your government, Hamas, is a terrorist organization, who's going to speak out? But I think that the announcement by President Trump a month ago or so that he's going to take over Gaza, the United States is going to take over Gaza and fix it and clean it and rebuild it with Arab help and Arab money, I think that plus the re-eruption of the war and Israel pushing deeper with ground forces and air forces against Hamas terrorists in Gaza, I think this is creating the potential of a critical mass of desperation and of people saying, enough, we can't take it anymore. Hamas needs to be overthrown. Let's pray that their tribe increases, pray for their courage, and pray for the total victory by Israel over Hamas, and that the U.S. can come in and help clean up and establish peace and figure out a way to rebuild Gaza. President Trump, I will just note, has backed off from the idea that all Palestinians in Gaza will have to leave forever, and we'll deal with that all more later. So, and I will also add that something else that's important, Lynn, right, is that when President Trump made this point that the United States is going to take over Gaza because nobody else has come up with a good idea, the Arab states, led by Egypt, but not Egypt alone, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Jordanians, and others, have actually put a plan on the table. I think it's about 100-page plan. It's a $53 billion plan to rebuild and reconstitute Gaza. So I think President Trump has I think he has forced some conversation about the future of Gaza. And I'm not saying that I know where it's going to lead. I don't. I still believe that Zephaniah 2 is a real prophecy, but I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. I'm not trying to draw a conclusion. I just want, these are some of the things that have been happening since we recorded our last podcast, and I think it's important for people to hear.
Absolutely. Well, probably we should wrap for now and get back to, we want to really talk about these pastors and all that we saw and heard and their reactions to their time down on the Gaza border, and many of them seeing Israel for the first time, meeting with leaders in both the Knesset and at the president's residence. And so we'll do that coming up in a future episode. But for now, I think we can say this is a time to not grow weary in praying, not to grow weary in well-doing, And this is a time that we need people to continue to stand with the Joshua Fund as we seek to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus. We especially appreciate people who are willing in these days to be monthly givers. That really helps us to see the future, that we can continue to support people as we're preparing budgets for 2025, and we see the needs really mushrooming, both in biblical counseling, in practical aid, in strengthening the church, in giving refreshment to pastors and ministry leaders who are growing weary. We want to be able to give them great refreshment, but to be able to do those things and plan those events and those retreats, we need to know that we have support from believers around the world whose heart and desire is to stand for Israel and to serve Israel's neighbors around the world. So we really appreciate people who are willing to give and to give on a regular basis. We would love to see those people increase.
I agree with that, and I appreciate it. People can go to joshuafund.com. Again, joshuafund.com, and you'll see a big banner right when you get there. You can click on it and to learn more about how to give, and you can give it securely online in a number of different ways, not just a credit card, but there's PayPal and a whole range of different sort of very modern and 21st century ways to give securely and give on a monthly basis if at all possible. If you can only do a one-time gift, we certainly appreciate it, but we would love it, as Lynn said, if you're able to become a monthly giver. It helps us plan. And you say, why are you guys working on your budget in April? Well, the reason is because our fiscal year in the Joshua Fund begins October 1st. So the next few months we'll be assessing what's happening strategically, where are we going, and each department will be doing this. I also want to say, in terms of refreshment, we've got the Alaska cruise coming up. And as much as we would love to bring you to Israel, just like this group of 50 pastors and ministry leaders came over with our staff and the Faith Wind staff, we're not quite ready to say that we can bring a large tour over to Israel because, again, we're still in a war. And we're really grateful. You'll hear this in the next podcast, but not a single person canceled in this little solidarity mission that we hosted. But again, even when we took them to the border, we were hearing the booms of Israeli artillery firing at Hamas positions. So we're not ready for a big tour yet, but we are praying about it and we are planning. So we'll get back to you. But how can we refresh